The knock comes quietly, not loud, not desperate, but cautious, as if the man on the other side already knows what kind of door this is and what weight the help he's asking for carries. Biting cold air streams in as the heavy steel door opens. A few men look up from the back of the room, and there he stands, a tired father, drenched from a sudden midnight downpour, holding the hand of a 7-year-old boy who looks like he hasn't slept in days. Before we reveal the terrifying truth this father was hiding, and the extreme lengths the Iron Brotherhood went to protect this boy, I must ask, who's with us today? Leave a comment and tell us what city or country you're watching from. We love to see how far our global brotherhood of viewers reaches. And if you believe a father's love is the strongest force on earth, hit that subscribe button now to join our family of protectors. The meeting. Victor, the chapter president, stood in the doorway, his massive tattooed figure silhouetted against the warm amber glow of the clubhouse. He looked down at the man, Thomas, and then at the boy, Felix. The night was cold to the bone, and a thin fog rolled from the pavement of the industrial district. Thomas didn't look like the typical person who sought out the club. He wasn't a criminal, and he wasn't looking for thrills. He wore a faded work jacket and worn leather boots, his face covered with the fine red dust of a long workday at the local quarry. But it was his eyes that stopped Victor in his tracks. They were wide, desperate, and haunted by a fear that went far beyond the physical. It was the look of a man who had reached the end of his rope and found it frayed down to a single thread. "Thomas," said Victor, his voice a deep, throaty rasp that seemed to vibrate in the cold air. "You're far from the workshop, man. It's midnight. What's going on? Why is the child out in this weather?" Thomas didn't respond with words at first. His jaw was clenched tight, as if he were trying to keep his soul from spilling out. He simply pulled Felix closer to his side, his hand trembling slightly. The boy clutched a tattered stuffed wolf, its fur matted and gray, his knuckles white with the effort of holding on. Felix didn't look at Victor. He kept his eyes fixed on the chrome of the motorcycles parked in the foyer, his small chest rising and falling in shallow, rhythmic gasps of fear. "I have nowhere else to go, Victor," Thomas finally croaked, his voice breaking like dry wood. "The police told me to wait. They told me there's a procedure. The social workers told me to trust the system. But Victor, the system is what lets them in. The system is what hands them the keys to my front door." The story unfolds. Victor stepped back, a silent invitation that prompted them to enter. The clubhouse was quiet tonight, the heavy smell of stale coffee, expensive bourbon, and gasoline hung in the air. A few of the brothers, including Stefan and Klaus, sat at the heavy oak bar in the back area, their eyes tracking the newcomers with a mixture of hardened curiosity and a strange protective mistrust. Thomas sat right on the edge of a wooden chair, refusing to lean back, as if he had to be ready to flee any second. "Tell me," said Victor, pulling up a stool across from him, his own tattooed arms crossed over his chest. "Who are they, and why the hell are you standing at my door at midnight? We've known each other a long time, Thomas. You've been fixing my bikes for a decade. I know you're an honest man. So tell me, what kind of monster makes an honest man look like he's waiting for the executioner?" Thomas looked down at his son, who had finally leaned his head against his father's leg, his eyes fluttering with exhaustion. A single heavy tear made its way through the dirt on Thomas's cheek. "It started with Anna," Thomas began, his voice dropping so low that the bikers had to lean forward to hear him. "My wife wasn't just an employee at Titan AG, Victor. She was a whistleblower. She discovered that the chemical waste they were dumping into the local reservoir, the same water the elementary school used, was poisoning the water. She had the samples, the lab photos, and the list of every council member and police captain who was paid to look away. 2 weeks ago, she died in that hit and run on Koenig Street. The police called it an accident. They told me she must have been distracted, but I know she was running. She was running for her life." The room fell deathly silent. The bikers were well aware of Titan AG. They were the largest employer in the county, the invisible hand that kept the city running while poisoning its veins. "The threat. They think I have the data, Victor," Thomas continued, his voice trembling now. "They've been following us for 10 days. I see the black SUVs at the end of my street every night. I hear the clicks on my phone line. Tonight I came home and found a man sitting in Felix's bedroom. He didn't steal anything. He didn't break a window. He just sat there in the dark, holding a knife, waiting for me to come in. He told me that if Anna's files aren't returned by tomorrow morning, Felix will be taken to a better home by the state, a home where I'll never find him. They have the law, the judges, and the hitman on their payroll. I'm just a mechanic with a 7-year-old son and no one to call. Victor felt a surge of cold, familiar rage. He looked at Stefan, whose knuckles turned white as he gripped the edge of the bar. Stefan had a son himself, and the look in his eyes was deadly. You're asking the Iron Brotherhood to hide a child from a billion-euro company and the entire local government? Asked Victor, his eyes narrowing. Thomas looked Victor directly in the eyes, desperation finally boiling over into a raw, heartbreaking plea. I'm asking you to be the wall they can't climb over, Victor. I'm asking you to be the only thing in this world that can't be bought. I'm asking you to save my son. Victor stood up, his leather vest creaking. He didn't look at Thomas. He looked at the boy. He walked over and knelt down, bringing himself to Felix's level. He examined the tattered stuffed wolf. That wolf looks like he's seen some fights, Felix, Victor said gently, his voice losing its iron edge. Do you know what wolves do when the wind gets cold? Felix shyly shook his head, clutching the toy tighter. They protect the pack, said Victor. And from now on, you and your father belong to our pack. And we don't let anyone touch our pack. Victor stood up again and turned to Klaus. Lock the gates. Encrypt the frequencies. If a bird flies over this clubhouse tonight, I want to know its blood type. Thomas, take the boy to the back room. Stefan, you're at the door. If Titan AG wants this child, they'll have to go through every single one of us. The confrontation. Just as Victor's words left his mouth, a deep, threatening rumble began to echo from the street. The sound of 3 heavy V8 engines pulling up to the outer gate. The hunters had arrived, but they hadn't realized they were no longer dealing with a lone father. They were dealing with a brotherhood of iron. Victor went to the front window and pulled back the heavy curtain. 3 black SUVs, their windows tinted dark as midnight, stood with engines running at the gate. No license plates, no markings, just the cold, predatory presence of men who thought they were untouchable. Klaus, Victor called without turning around. Turn on the external monitors. I want every angle recorded. If they so much as breathe on that gate, I want it on every server from here to Munich. Klaus nodded, his fingers flying across a laptop screen. Cameras are live, Victor. We have thermal imaging on the SUVs. 4 men in each vehicle. They're equipped. Bulletproof vests, tactical headsets. This isn't just security. This is a special team. Victor stepped back from the window. He looked at Thomas, who was holding Felix so tightly as if trying to merge with the boy. Thomas, listen to me. Take Felix to the basement vault room. It's made of reinforced steel and concrete. Stefan will stay with you. Don't open that door for anyone but me. Understood. Thomas nodded, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and a new flickering hope. Thank you, Victor. I didn't think anyone would help. We're not just helping, Thomas, Victor said, reaching for a heavy chain belt. We're making a statement. The power of the Brotherhood. As Stefan led Thomas and Felix to the back, Victor turned to the other brothers. About 15 men now stood in the clubhouse. All were veterans of the street and the shadows. They didn't need a speech. They knew what was at stake. They think they can walk into our house and grab a child because they have corporate lawyers and corrupt cops behind them, Victor said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. They think we're just outlaws. Let's show them that outlaws have longer memories and hit harder than any executive in a suit. A heavy metallic bang echoed through the room. Someone was at the gate using a battering ram. Klaus, Victor commanded, open the gate. The brothers looked at him in surprise. Victor, you want to let them in? No, Victor said, a dark smile spreading across his face. I want them to get close enough to see the mistake they're making. Open the gate and tell the boys to get the bikes ready. If they want a war, we'll give them one they can't lawyer their way out of. The gate hummed as it opened. The 3 SUVs didn't hesitate. They thundered onto the gravel lot, churning up dust and rain, screeching to a stop in a semicircle in front of the clubhouse entrance. The doors flew open and 12 men in black tactical gear got out. They held their weapons at low ready, their movements synchronized and robotic. In the center of the group stood a man in a sharp gray suit that cost more than Thomas's house. He didn't look like a soldier. He looked like a man who signed checks for soldiers. He He stepped forward and straightened his tie, as if walking into a boardroom. "Victor," the man shouted over the wind. "My name is Brenner. I'm the security chief of Titan AG. We know you have Thomas Muller and his son inside. We have a court-ordered emergency custody order for the child. Hand them over and we can all go back to sleep. Resist, and I'll have the Bundeswehr here by sunrise to level this place to the ground." Victor stepped alone onto the porch. He stood at the top of the stairs and looked down at Brenner and his armed thugs. He had no weapon in hand. He had a cigarette. He lit it, the flame of the lighter casting a brief, jagged glow on his face. "Brenner," Victor said, blowing a cloud of smoke into the rain. "You've got a lot of toys for a guy who's just serving a warrant. But you see, you made a mistake. You came to an Iron Brotherhood clubhouse at midnight. Out here, your warrants don't mean much more than toilet paper, and your Bundeswehr threat, that's cute, but I think you'll find that my brothers also have a few friends in high places." Brenner sneered and gestured to his team. "I'm not here to debate with you, Victor. Step aside, or we'll go through you." Victor leaned against the doorframe, looking completely unconcerned. "You know, Anna was a good woman, Brenner. She cared about this city. She cared about the children who drank that poisoned water. It's a shame what happened to her. But Felix, he has his mother's spirit, and he has something else now too." Victor whistled once, a sharp, piercing tone. Suddenly, the silence of the industrial district was shattered. From the dark alleys on both sides of the clubhouse, the thunder of 50 Harley engines broke loose simultaneously. Headlights cut through the darkness, blinding the tactical team. From every corner of the lot, Iron Brotherhood members appeared, their bikes forming a tight, vibrating circle around the three SUVs. It wasn't just the local chapter. Victor had called the neighboring chapters. Within seconds, Brenner and his 12 men were surrounded by almost 80 bikers. All armed, all looking for a reason. Brenner's face went pale. He looked around at the wall of leather and chrome. His tactical team shifted their aim, their eyes twitching back and forth as they realized they were vastly outnumbered. "You said something about going through me?" asked Victor, descending the first step. "I'm right here, Brenner. Let's see how far your company's insurance policy reaches when the thunder strikes." The law arrives. The standoff was absolute. The only sound was the idling of 80 engines and the heavy rain pounding on the hoods of the SUVs. Brenner looked at Victor, then at the silent, stone-faced men surrounding him. He knew he'd lost this round, but as he reached for his radio, a new sound began to approach from the distance. The shrill wail of police sirens. "The law is here," Brenner hissed, a desperate grin returning to his face. "Let's see how your pack handles the precinct." Victor didn't move. He just looked at the approaching lights and whispered to himself, "Good. I've been waiting for them." The blue and red lights of the approaching police cars danced across the rain-wet pavement of the industrial district, reflecting off the polished chrome of 80 idling Harleys like a strobe light in a fever dream. Brenner, Titan AG's security chief, now stood taller, his confidence returning like a physical suit of armor as he straightened his expensive silk tie. He looked at the massive steel gates of the Iron Brotherhood clubhouse and then back at the approaching sirens. In his head, the arrival of the local precinct meant the end of the game. He believed the law would do what his hired guns couldn't, force the outlaws to bend the knee and hand over the boy. But as the 6 patrol cars screeched to a stop, boxing in the bikers from behind, Victor didn't move an inch. He didn't drop his cigarette, and he didn't look toward the sirens. He kept his eyes on Brenner, watching the man's smug satisfaction with a cold, predatory patience. The truth comes to light. Captain Werner, a man whose face was marked by the stress of a decade of balancing corporate bribes with public service, got out of the lead patrol car. He didn't look like a hero. He looked like a man caught between two fires. He looked at the sea of leather vests, the various chapter patches that had answered Victor's call, and finally at Brenner. The air was thick with the smell of ozone, wet asphalt, and the metallic scent of an approaching storm. Werner knew that one wrong move tonight would ignite a war that would burn the city to its foundations. "Victor!" Werner shouted, his voice strained and breaking under the weight of the moment. "We have a report of a kidnapping and a riot in progress. This is an illegal assembly. Disperse these men and hand over the Muller child immediately. That's your only warning, Victor. Don't throw away your club for a mechanic and his kid. This is bigger than you." Victor stepped off the porch and walked slowly to the gate. Each step was deliberate, his heavy boots crunching on the gravel in a perfect, menacing rhythm. The iron brotherhood parted for him like a black tide. Their faces stoic and unreadable. He stopped only inches from the iron bars and looked Werner directly in the eyes. Kidnapping. That's a strong word for a father seeking refuge, Captain, Victor said, his voice a deep, dangerous growl that seemed to come from his chest. I have a man and his son in my house seeking protection from a group of armed mercenaries who don't have a single carry license in this state. As for a riot, my brothers are just having a late-night gathering. As far as I know, freedom of assembly still applies to men who wear leather. Or does Titan AG's payroll keep you from reading the basic law? The warrant is legal, Victor, Brenner interjected, stepping forward and waving a manila folder like a weapon. The father is mentally unstable, a danger to himself and the child. We have the court-ordered emergency custody papers right here. Open the gate, or the captain will be forced to use gas. We're bringing this boy back to safety. Victor didn't even acknowledge Brenner's presence. He kept his gaze on Werner. Are you sure you want to go this way, Captain? Are you sure you want to be the face of the men who snatched a 7-year-old boy for a company that pumped poison into the reservoir our children drink from? Because while you were driving here, we weren't just drinking coffee. We were doing the job the precinct was too afraid to do. Victor signaled over his shoulder without looking. Klaus stepped forward, holding a rugged military-grade tablet. He turned the screen toward the police dash cams, making sure the footage was recorded by the very system the police used for evidence collection. On the screen was a live upload of the files Anna had died protecting, the ghost drive that Thomas had brought in his pocket. We spent the last hour decrypting the data, Captain, Victor said. Anna was a genius. She didn't just find the dump sites. She documented the money flow. It's all there, the payrolls for special services. The high-resolution photos of the chemical barrels buried less than a mile from the elementary school. And most importantly, the direct transfers from a Titan AG subsidiary to a shell company owned by your brother-in-law. It's a paper trail that leads directly to your front door, Werner. This isn't a kidnapping case anymore. This is an organized crime case. The color drained from Captain Werner's face, leaving him sickly and gray in the flashing strobe of the police lights. The officers standing behind him, local men who lived in this city, who had children in these schools, began looking at each other. They were no longer moving toward the gate. They were moving away from their captain. The tension shifted. It was no longer police versus bikers. It was truth versus betrayal. You're bluffing, Werner stammered, his hands trembling as he touched his holster. You couldn't crack those files that fast. They're encrypted with military software. I didn't have to crack them, Victor replied. Anna was smart. She didn't just encrypt them. She set them to automatically upload to a secure cloud server if her personal heart rate monitor flatlined for more than 10 minutes. The ghost drive Thomas brought was just the physical key to release the last batch of documents. And the moment those patrol cars turned onto this street, that key was turned. The FBI and every major news agency in the state now have the files. You're not here to save a boy, Werner. You're here to destroy the evidence. But you're too late. The thunder is already here, and it's loud enough to wake the dead. The heart of the story. The heavy steel door of the clubhouse opened with a slow, plaintive creak. Stefan stepped out, but he wasn't holding a weapon. He was carrying little Felix, who was still clutching his tattered stuffed wolf. Thomas walked beside them, his shoulders finally straight, his head held high for the first time since his wife's funeral. He looked at the police, the mercenaries, and the dark sky, and he didn't look afraid. Victor gestured for them to stay back, then turned his attention to the heartbreaking reason that had brought Thomas to his door at midnight. Tell them, Thomas, Victor commanded, his voice echoing across the lot. Tell them why they were so desperate to get their hands on your son before the world could see those files. Tell them what kind of monsters they really are. Thomas stepped to the edge of the porch, the rain plastering his hair to his forehead and soaking through his thin jacket. It wasn't just the data on the drive. My wife knew they were coming for her. She knew that if she died, they'd search the house, the car, and even my locker at the workshop. So she did something only a mother could think of. She hid the physical samples, the raw proof of the poison, not in a safe or a bank vault. She opened the seam of Felix's stuffed wolf, the one he's had since the day he was born. She put the vials and the paper ledger inside and sewed it back up with needle and thread. Thomas's voice broke as he looked at his son, his eyes filled with a raw, agonizing love. She told Felix that as long as he kept the wolf safe,